How you guys doing tonight? Oh, good, good. Tonight, we're going to call this a conversation. That's what it's going to be, a conversation between all of us here on stage. We hope that people that are here tonight, you get a fresh perspective maybe. I want to just give you a brief just idea of where this came from for me and Pastor Alex, and we were talking about this the past few weeks. When the Ahmaud Arbery case happened, when that video came out, that was really, really rough to watch. It was gut-wrenching. It was something I've never seen before in real life. To be honest, I've never seen anything like that. It was very disturbing. We had a podcast the very next week, talked about racism. We had Michael Hunt here. We talked about racism in the church and different things. And then a couple weeks later, George Floyd was murdered. And I think I watched that video 10 times. And the only reason I watched it that many times is I could not believe what I was seeing. And I just kept watching it. And it just became more and more real every time I saw it. And it broke my heart. It broke me in two. I was in disbelief and in shock at what I saw. Just the disregard of humanity. And then I thought about all the things growing up as a kid, growing up around a bunch of racist kids, and just the things you hear as a kid, whether it be your parents or your grandparents or all those people that surround you and influence you, and the thoughts that I had in my head about black people and what I thought and what I believed. And I've been away from that for a really, really long time, but I thought about all those things. And then I thought about like where we live here. Because I know there's a bigger picture. I know there's these things happening that we see, these injustices that we see in our country. And then right now, we're in such a huge tension of politics and just so many distractions. But I thought about where I live, and that was important to me because there's racism here where we live, and I wanted to address it in a way that people could understand. Coming from me, because I can't speak from a black perspective, but I can speak from mine. And it was important for me to say the things I've said publicly, for people to know that, yes, there is lots of racist behavior here. Now, it's under the surface. Now, the longer this goes, the more that's going to come to the surface, the more you're going to see that. People's hearts will eventually, it will come out of their mouth. And I think we've seen that a lot, even on social media. But I don't think you can change a heart in the comment box. I think these things right here have to take place because we all have to gain perspective for one another, to learn each other, to do life together. Because I can assure you, out of all the friends that I have, and this is myself included sometimes for sure, I don't know that anyone regularly, as white people, have black people at their house, to have dinner, to just hang out, to do life together. We just don't do that. I don't see that. And maybe that's the thing that Facebook never shows. Maybe that's censored somehow. I doubt it, but I just don't see it. And so this whole thing, and I'll be honest, this whole conversation tonight came from seeing something on Facebook that disturbed me so much, I had to go to bed. I literally had to go to bed so I would not comment. I got up and I went straight to bed and I went to sleep, and I got up the next morning and I was like, we have to have this conversation now. God was just like, it's time to go. So tonight is the night we're going to talk and let people in our community who sometimes don't think this exists see that it does, and also see that there is hope, because we are right here together right now having this conversation, and that's important. But before we can ever even attempt to solve a problem, we have to understand and realize and admit there is one. And I talked to a lady today who goes to our church, and she was like, up until a month ago, I had no idea a lot of this stuff even existed. And sometimes you're not aware of those things, but I've been in a lot of circles in my life, and a lot of different groups of people. I've heard things that are really, really awful, that are really terrible, that should never be said. I've said some things that are in the same category. So I don't want to exclude myself in that, but I hope you guys can learn something tonight, and I hope I can learn something tonight, a perspective that I don't even have yet. I always ask God to stretch me and grow me and help me see things that I don't see. But in the past month, these guys, I've had the opportunity to have conversations with them, and they've been amazing. They have shed light on things I had no idea that were even happening. So I've been able to retell their stories to some people, and they're like, man, really? Yeah, like that's real. And that's been good, though. Like people need to hear those things. So tonight I wanted them to be here, to be able to share their stories and let you guys see that and let us all understand what is going on in our area, because our area can be better. And if we can get better, some of these things that we see that are systemic racism and all these things, those things can change too. But I think we have to really be intentional where we live and start there as well. So I want to introduce everybody. This is Anthony Ballard. He's a pastor, a coach. Give him a hand. Joshua Forbes. He's a pastor at Life Church in Memphis. Nick Glenn, police officer from Milan, Tennessee. Keith Howard, private security. Keith is from Greenfield. So is Anthony. I don't know how I got these guys from Greenfield to get here, but I'm super excited they are. That's where I'm from. It's my hometown, and I'm glad you guys are here. Thanks for coming. And then Pastor Alex right here on the end. Yeah, give him a hand. Give him a hand. Yeah, give him a hand. So we're just going to talk. I'm going to let these guys kind of share some stories with you. And I know we're in this climate. You know, there's a lot of tension right now. And Anthony, I just want you to start. Just kind of share some of the things that we talked about a couple weeks ago. We were at the park in Milan, and we had a chance to talk about a couple different things. And one thing that I've talked about quite openly, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way, because I don't want anybody to ever feel like you should hate your own race or be mad or, like anything like that. But there is a thing that does exist in this world, and it's called white privilege. I know those two words sting people, and it gets people upset sometimes. We don't like to think about it. But there are things that we are privileged to never have to see, interact with, encounter that other people do. So do you mind kind of sharing some perspective on that, just in your own life? I know we talked about your job. That was huge. That shed a lot of perspective for me. And kind of share with us.
First of all, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to be here.
Absolutely.
We pray God's blessing upon you and on your ministry. What you're doing is a beautiful thing and a much needed thing. I believe that racism has gotten much worse in the last, probably whenever President Obama became president, because it was something different.
Yeah, no doubt.
And then to go from one extreme of this black guy who's the president to another extreme of someone who many of us in my culture consider to be a racist, is just too big of a culture shock to go from this level of compassion. Is just speaking from my perspective, please. And then you see this other person who's in charge of our country who has kind of flaunted racism, in my opinion. And what it has done in some instances allowed those who did have these issues to be more bold in expressing these issues. You know, I believe that the core of it all is just not so much as racism or racist, but a lack of knowledge of us having towards one another. You know, when you're born in the same hospital, but you die in different cemeteries, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's good.
When you go to the same schools, and then all of a sudden, you know, whenever I was studying my master's in education, I watched the playground. Man, at first, second, third grade, all of them jokers are just nasty. They slobbing all over the place. Here's my ice cream, you take a lick, and everything is fine. But somewhere around 5th to 6th grade, going into that middle school age, we begin to remind them that they are not like their best friend. And as a result, I think the education system, not an educational system, but the overall public education, when you only see my culture as slaves, as maids, as servants, and we would talk about black tribes and this and that. We always, going over and taking this particular stuff from this black guy. And now it promotes a misunderstanding on who we really are. And now we have children who are now 4 and 5 years old who are beginning to stereotype each other, not even realizing it. And as a result of it, public education now, in my opinion, becomes the foundation for all of this hatred. Because we're trying to educate a public that doesn't include me. We learn more about Asians, love them. Iraqis, love them. Whoever. But every time I am displayed in a history book, there are whips on my back. There are other things that doesn't say that I'm good enough to be like everybody else. So as a result, we automatically have this image that is indoctrinated in us at 4 and 5 years old. And nobody breaks that cycle there. And then you turn on the TV. I mean, man, is there anybody else on cops getting arrested besides black people and Mexicans? So now you have all of these things that are beginning to add on to it. And then we stand in our churches on Sunday mornings and say, love each other. But yet the other 6 days of the week, we're getting everything but love. And it's not just in your culture, it's also in my culture. I think the system has become very deliberately on keeping us separated. And we are beginning to buy into it. But every trick of the devil with proper communication, God was still working for our good. I have a lot of experiences, and I'm not going to dive into a lot of them now. I'm just not led to. But I will say this. In order for this to take place, it takes blacks and whites, Jews and Gentiles, believers and unbelievers, to come together and have these healthy conversations. And what you're doing here, I'm just curious, how long have you guys been here?
In this building since January.
Since January. I mean, it takes that new kid on the block, this generation, to say, you know what? I wasn't here when Martin Luther King did what he did, or I wasn't here whenever the segregation took place, but I know the word tells me to love my brother. And we sometimes have got to, I don't want to say get rid of a generation. I'm not saying killing everybody out. But get past the curse of that generation. And it takes the younger generation, like us, to really begin to work on these things. And that's when I believe that God will hear our cry and heal the land as we begin just to address these things. I have some things that have happened on my life that I may have caused myself. I'm not perfect. But yes, there have been several things that have happened to me and my children because of the color of their skin. And until we are willing to sit down, my brother, and talk on a real level, until we're ready to have this honest conversation about what's really going on, these things will continue to happen. Because right now, there's a generation of people who are saying, enough is enough. But nobody was counting on both races getting fed up. So now there's a movement of blacks and white who are your age. You know, I just turned 47. I know I look a little young, 25, but I just turned 47. But these people are saying, you know what? This can't be, because what they're telling me on Sundays about love, and now they're telling me I can't talk to Anthony or I can't talk to whomever, there are going to be some issues with that. So I just believe that now is as good a time as ever to finally say, let's have these conversations. Would it change overnight? No. But with the will of God, it don't have to take it another decade either. My old saying when I'm teaching history, now I'm the dean of discipline at our school in Humboldt. I'm the high school football coach as well. I'm quickly to tell people, Rome was not built in one day, but they did work. So now It's not going to happen overnight. But for us leaders to just go home and act like everything is okay, in my opinion, that's just a straight abundance to God. I believe that God has allowed these things to happen, but I also believe in Romans 8:28, it also works for my good. So regardless of what the devil is doing try to disturb this, I'm just crazy enough to believe that every work of the devil will not work when you got true believers who know the love of God. And we begin to have true conversations like that. Thank you for asking me that.
That's good. Thank you, Anthony. Mr. Forbes, I know you've got something. I could feel it.
Man, we had an amazing conversation, a couple of conversations here in the past few weeks, and I want to thank you so much for just the courage to lead this conversation. And it's when we have a series of conversations just like this that we're able to move the ball down the field. And so this is not an add water and mix solution. Like, this is not going to be the end of racism as we know it, but it is the beginning of a conversation. And God, he is the God of conversations. You know, every time he encounters somebody in the Bible, he has a conversation with them. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, he had conversations with them, and it's through those conversations that their lives were changed. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'm 36 years old, and if you can't tell, my accent doesn't reflect that I'm from the South. I've lived here for about 16 years. I moved to Memphis, Tennessee in 2004 to pursue the ministry, but I grew up in a military family, and I spent my entire childhood in Great Falls, Montana, and Cheyenne, Wyoming. I went to rodeos. I wore belt buckles. I wore cowboy boots. I wore bolo neckties. I listened to Metallica. I listened to Leonard Skinner, and so I'm just a Western United States American kid who happens to have black skin. My mom is white, my dad is black, I speak Spanish, and so I'm just all sorts of jumbled up. I'm all sorts of mixed up. Diversity could be my middle name if you wanted to replace Rick with diversity. So that's where I'm at. And so I'm living in Memphis, and my skin color, allows me, to identify, more with the African Americans who live in the city. But my cultural background and experience, if I had to go out to small town Tennessee, I could listen to Skinner with the best of them. I could listen to country music with the best of them. But just simply by looking at me, you wouldn't be able to tell that. I'm 6'2". I'm 300 pounds. I'm a big guy, and so unless you get to have a conversation with me, you'll never understand exactly who I am and where I come from. We talked about what's the solution to this problem and what's going on, and I said something powerful, something that we actually say at our church. It is, culture is something that you celebrate, and it's something that you tolerate. And so if we want this situation to change in our country, we have to start finding the behaviors that we want, and we need to celebrate those. The behaviors that we want to see, we have to start celebrating them. And the things that we don't want to tolerate, we have to speak to it, and we have to speak to it quick. We have to have a high feedback culture whenever we see any sort of subtle racism. I don't know if you've heard of the term microaggressions. Microaggressions they're very subtle statements that really, it could go over your head, or, it could, be sort of a jab. Those are things that we can't tolerate in our society because they build on top of one another. And then it allows you, if you are the one issuing those microaggressions, to be more bold, in displaying an outward behavior. All of us have seen the video of George Floyd. We saw him laying down on the pavement. We saw the police officer with his knee in his neck and with his hands in his pocket. And I was having a conversation with a friend, and I was like, if you're killing somebody, usually you're in an act of rage, or it's an act of passion that you're killing somebody. But the gesture of having your hands in your pocket is almost like a sign of indifference. I don't care. It doesn't matter. And it spoke volumes. And I think in addition to the Ahmaud Arbery video, I think this one was more gruesome, it was a tipping point because we could actually see it. We could actually feel it. Rewind the story several decades ago to a young man by the name of Emmett Till. People were being lynched, back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, but maybe you didn't see a lot of pictures of it. You heard that it happened, or when somebody didn't come home, you knew that they were gone forever. But Emmett Till's mother, when asked, can we show the picture? Can we have the open casket so that we could put it in the newspapers? That was the thing that was the tipping point for the civil rights movement, because they saw how gruesome it was. It wasn't just a black or white, it was a human rights thing. It's like, how can we do this to another human being? And so fast forward today, that's what we're seeing. We're having to answer that same question. How can we do that to another human being? And then we start seeing the patterns. In 2014, 2015, several dozen African Americans, met their end, at the face of police brutality. Like, this is not an accident, it's not a one-off. And so we have to change what we want to celebrate, and we have to change what we tolerate. And so we're having this conversation. And so then the question to us is, what are we going to celebrate? What behaviors do we want to celebrate? And what behaviors do we not want to celebrate, that we don't want to tolerate? And that's going to take courage from each and every one of you here in this audience, to say, hey, yeah, we can't tolerate that. You have to speak your voice. You have to speak your mind, even if your voice trembles. That may be a friend that you're confronting that may have said something off color or said something overtly racist. Even if your voice trembles, you have to speak the truth to them in love and say, that is not acceptable. And so my mom, she's white, and I had a hard conversation with her. We talked about white privilege, and she was oblivious to it. My brother is white. He's 10 years older than me, and he understands it. He gets it. He lives in northern Idaho, and northern Idaho it's if I can't mince words, it's a white supremacist stronghold. I'm just being honest. But I used to vacation there. And when I was a kid, my mom and my brother, for obvious reasons, wouldn't let me go and play at the park by myself. And I never asked, well, why not? I just accepted it and I moved on. When we drove back through the state of Montana to go to Great Falls, and I'd have to use the restroom at a highway side bar or dive, my mom would always send my white stepdad in with me. He didn't have to use the bathroom, but that's because she was looking out for me, because she understood where she lived and she understood it. And she may not necessarily agreed with it, but she understood it. And my problem was it was an it to be understood. Why am I being judged by the color of my skin? Even before I became a pastor at the Life Church, I used to sell home security. And I'm a pretty tall and intimidating guy. If I have a frown on my face, it makes it even worse. And so what do? I have to provide for my family. So I put on a pair of fashion glasses that I don't need because it makes me look more approachable. It makes me look less threatening. I shrug my posture when I come to the door. I'm a person, I like standing up straight. I like having confidence, but in order to make myself look less threatening, I have to do this because the public perception of a black male has been portrayed as menacing, as demonizing. I don't know if you watch old black and white films, but Birth of a Nation, that was released in the 20th century, early 20th century, it portrayed black men as menacing, as rapists. And even when you watch the local newscast, we are the most profiled suspect, when it comes to the crime stories. An African American male between 18 and 24 years of age, between 5'8" and 6'2". There's a lot of pretty much every one of us, fits that profile, and it bothers me that, I have to alter my appearance. I have to alter my posture. I have to do these things in order to be determined as safe. Even in my own church, with the little kids, I resolved in my mind that I didn't ever want them to be afraid of me. And so, because I didn't want them to be afraid of me, I would always get down on my knees and I would stick my hand out and I'd let them give me a high five. And I would let them think that they actually hurt me. I would play it out. I was like, oh my gosh, it hurts. And it amused them. It amused them, but it also communicated to them in their mind that they were stronger than me. And because they were stronger than me, they were safe. And I'll continue to do that to earn their trust. But we have to change the way we view, African Americans, people of color, so that these relationships can begin to forge without having that have to happen. Does that make sense? And we're still doing that. But you know what? As parents, you don't even have to teach your kids that darker skinned people are the bad guy. Just watch Disney. Have you ever seen The Little Mermaid? Ursula, she wasn't a black woman or a white woman. She was purple. She was darker colored, and we always associate the bigger, darker figure as the bad guy. So we're fighting against animation. You watch Hercules. Hades wore darker clothes, and he was a purple guy. And so that's another issue that we have to get over. We have to get to the place where in our minds, we don't see people of color as menacing or unsafe. We have to see them as people.
That's good. That's good. Thank you, Josh. Mr. Nick.
Good evening, everybody. We can really just stop and go home right now, can we not? Because we have nuggets that already are big enough to chew on and think on and develop and help us grow. But as we have a conversation and as we continue, it's very important that we do it, and we do it in a way that is open, two-way communication. And with two-way communication, a big important piece of that is honesty and being open. And as you all have been so welcoming to have us come in, and thank you so very much. I sit in the chair that I sit in, and I'm a lot different than a lot of people that you probably meet. Some people will say because I'm a New York Mets fan, but hey, I just have good taste in the baseball team, right? That's what I say. But I'm a lot different when it comes to that. But and as we go and as I tell you a little bit about my story and how I got to where I am, I first want to ask you all, when you look at the situation with George Floyd and that horrible incident, and as introduced, I am in law enforcement. Take a hard look at the picture. Because, and I want you to clearly hear me, I'm not defending something that's not defendable. But in actuality, the individual's hands were not in his pockets. He had on black gloves. And the black glove laying on the dark pant made the appearance of his hands were in his pocket. And the reason I say that is when the incident first took place and I watched the video, before I watched the video, I saw a still picture. And I was at my office and I immediately got enraged because I said, and he has the audacity to have his hands in his pockets. But then I looked closely at the picture, and it just was not the case. So as we have a conversation, as we're talking about tonight, and we talk about honesty and being open, we still have to leave room for, even if it's an honesty that we don't actually want to hear, that we still have to bring it out and say and call it what it is. Now, as we do that, as I hope that the 6'2", 300-pound guy doesn't beat me up because I just told him something different. As we do that and we go through the process, I'm a guy who I started in law enforcement and I was certified in 2003. I started working for a department in 2002, and things were a little bit different then. In 2003, got certified, And along the way in that journey, I've been blessed by the Lord to be able to coach college football. And as I coached college football, I was a recruiting coordinator and watched guys that I had a hand in recruiting make it to the NFL and score touchdowns on Sunday. Right? It's nothing like getting a call on Sunday evening with somebody saying, "Coach, did you see me score a touchdown?" And you say, "Yeah, man, I saw it." Right? I gave you all that talent. I coached that. Right? That was me. But as you go through that and you talk about it and you see that and coach, I did that while still being involved in law enforcement. But I started in ministry. The first time that I stood up in front of a group of individuals and proclaimed the word of God was in the summer of 1998. So I've been in law enforcement long enough to know a little bit about law enforcement. I now am a supervisor, training officer, and lieutenant, do all that kind of stuff. But I've also been in ministry long enough to know a little bit about some stuff. And along the way in ministry, have been a collegiate pastor, and I served as a senior pastor at a church. Had a wonderful experience there, and life has been really, really good to me. But the thing that stands out in my story and my process and in my walk is the reason that I am in law enforcement is because of a very negative and horrible experience with a police officer in front of my own home as a 16-year-old in the city I grew up in called Memphis, Tennessee. You see, you have to understand the reason I was outside was that my chore, my responsibility at my house was to line up all the cars in the driveway in the proper order that those of us that lived in the house needed to leave the next morning because my father worked at night. So he would leave at 10 o'clock, so I had to line up the vehicles so we could leave in the proper order the next morning. And it's dark outside. I'm lining the cars up. We have a singular driveway. What I have to do is take one car, place it across the street, go get another car. It was tedious. As a 16-year-old, I did not appreciate it. But you know what? I did what my father told me to do. That's the household that I grew up in. And this one particular evening, I have one car across the street. I'm backing another car down. I need to switch them out. And there's a crest in front of our house. And I look down to the end of the street at the stop sign, and I see headlights. And my 16-year-old brain says that there is a vehicle coming. You don't need to be in the street. Run across the street and get in the car so you don't get hit by a car. Well, as I start running across the street, blue lights come on, the spotlight comes on, get on the ground, and now here I am in a situation, and I'm thinking in my head, I'm only doing what I've been told to do. And I'm saying, "Officer, this is my house. This is my car. Here are the keys. I'm doing what I've been told to do." And in that posture and being on the ground and going through everything that we went through, my father came out because it took me too long to come back into the house to see what was going on. Well, he worked at the Shelby County Correction Center, had his uniform on, so was able to step down and talk to the officers, and everything immediately changed because a person with the badge came down and could articulate, "Stop." And I remember looking up in the eyes of that officer whose face I can still see today and thinking in my head, one day I am going to be a police officer and I'm going to be better than you. I'm going to do the job in a way that I don't ever mistreat anybody, and I will always treat people that I come in contact with respect. And I would do it in such a way that if I ever am in the same room with you again, I would tell you about it. Well, I haven't seen him since. I've been looking for him, though. Haven't seen him. But as we go through that process, I would love to sit here and tell you that that's the last time that I had a negative interaction with a police officer, but guess what? It's not. Because I've had negative interactions since 2003. Pop quiz, when did I start in law enforcement? 2003. So as you go through life and as you develop, you have the question that one must ask himself and say, you know what? Am I going to allow these negative things to make me turn negative? Or am I going to allow these negative things to propel me to be better than everybody else at what they're doing? See, that's my mentality, is I win. Period. When I coach, when I play ball, when I go to work, I don't mow my yard anymore, my sons do that. When I supervise my sons mowing the yard, I win. That's what I do. And that process of going through that, the understanding is I cannot allow something that's not good to derail the rest of what God has for me. So as we look at the process of saying we have issues and we have problems, and yes, we do, but what I encourage people to always do is look at what's around you and don't take somebody else's issue and make it your issue. You may not live in a city where there is an issue with how police officers treat people. Celebrate that, as we talked about earlier. Tell your police department, you know what, you do a good job. And we want to help you maintain and keep doing this good job. But there are some people over there that aren't doing a good job, and we want to talk against them. See, what we struggle with from time to time is when we let everything get smashed together, is we forget that when we lump everything in one big barrel, that some people may get confused. And when some people get confused, they may have a great intention, and that wonderful intention gets perverted, and now all of a sudden the whole message gets lost. So as we go through all of that, remember I said I've also served as a senior pastor with me. One of the issues that I have seen glaringly when it comes to race relations is that the church has failed. Church leadership has failed. I have stood in front of the congregation that I was responsible for and directly challenged them and asked the question, who have you invited to church, and does everybody that you invite to church look just like you? Because for the most part, we invite the people that we're comfortable with to come to church. That's why we invite them to church. Well, if we look at it beyond the next level, we should say, if the church is the place of healing, why am I not inviting people that make me uncomfortable? Why am I not inviting people that I don't work with, that don't live in my neighborhood? The makeup of the church body should be more than everybody that lives on my street. We should look around, and the church should be intertwined and developed with individuals that bring different things to the table. When you look at a church, again, I've been a senior pastor, been a football coach, been a police officer, am a father, am a husband. I speak to things as I see them from what I have experienced. When we look at churches, why do we not ask the question of leadership, why are you living at this level, but those whom you are responsible for are living at this level? If we're going to have a pastor that has a huge house and fancy cars and is financially secure, there should be other people in that church that are experiencing the same thing. It should not just be all at the top. Because if we think about it the other way, when we go to work, we expect the boss to want us to get paid, true or false? We say, hey, the boss is going to get paid more than me because they're the boss. But you know what, boss? I better get a paycheck every 2 weeks. But when it comes to church, why don't we ask of our church leadership, how have I developed under your leadership? When I say church leadership has failed, I say it because from a perspective of church leadership should ask the question, are the people that are coming to my church, are they growing spiritually, and are they developing beyond the level of which they walked in the door? They should not be attached to the same ministry for the next 25 years. At some point, they should be asked to be a part of another ministry because they have matured in a way that says they bring value to whatever they touch, so we got to have them a part of some different stuff. The seats should change. So, preacher, why are you talking about church, talking about racism? Because in my view, if we love the Lord the way we say we love the Lord, we would treat people the way we know people should be treated. Now, notice I said the way we know people should be treated, because when we are full-grown adults, we understand that it's cool to say, treat people how you want to be treated. Great, wonderful, I get it, kind, that's churchy, lovely. Hey, take it to the bank. But we know how people should be treated, and we just don't do it. And when we have leadership that doesn't call it out when they see it, why do we go to church and get mistreated? And leadership allows it to continue to happen. But then we say, you know what? We got to deal with racism, but we don't deal with the spiritual nature of the issues that we have in the house. And if the house isn't together, nothing else is going to be together. So then we take the eyes spiritually that do not mature because our leadership does not challenge us to mature. And then we apply those eyes to what we see that goes on in the world, and we don't respond to it from a spiritual nature. We respond to it from a carnal and angry nature, and we do more damage because spiritually we are not where we should be. You didn't think a police officer was going to say that, did you? That's why I told you I'm different in a lot of different kind of ways. Because you see, you must understand, I've been in rooms in different capacities and done different things, and I've interacted with people in different ways. And in the same day, I have processed arrest warrants, delivered a eulogy, and officiated a wedding in the same day. People that I have recruited to be a part of a university and a team have officiated their weddings and watched their families begin to grow. People that I have arrested have come back to my office and said, tell me about that man named Jesus that I heard about, because I know you to be a preacher. You see, we have to embrace all the rooms that the Lord puts us in. We have to be able to say, everything that God has given me, He's given it to me for a reason. And if I use it for His glory, He will always get the glory. And when we look at things that we don't understand, as children of God, before we open our mouth, we ought to lay at the feet of the Lord and say, how do I need to process this? How do I need to respond to this? How do I need to begin to address this situation? Because our young people watch us. Oh, what? I broke protocol. I didn't get my age, did I? Everybody else did, so I got to do it too, right? Yes, right? So I'm 40 years old and old enough to remember playing outside freely in the 80s and not worrying about anything, and then worrying about the man in the white van and how he was going to get thrown in the back of the white van, and things changed, and then the thing called crack showed up, and the world changed, and the before and the after of how just say no turned into just do you, boo, and just do it, and all the things that have happened in the world. To see the progression of the sliding scale. And the one constant thing is the church did not deal with issues the way the church should have dealt with issues. Because that's just how I believe on the Lord. That everything we need is in the house. Everything is in the house of God. So as we go and as we continue our conversations, don't look at it from a perspective of anger. But it's going to get you mad. It's going to get you upset. It's upsetting. But once we get beyond being angry, we need to look at it from a perspective of, Lord, what are you saying to me? And how can I affect change in this situation and become better because of what I have experienced?
I think it's important for us that we feel the same way about church. Like, these conversations need to be in church, like in the house. And I know that church has always been segregated. It's been segregated for a long time. That's one of the hardest things to navigate through, to be honest. Like, it's two really different cultures, and then you have people that come to your church, and you're trying to be multicultural, you're trying to do all these things. You want it to be that way. You want it to be very organic. You want, to have white friends and black friends and Hispanic friends and Asian friends and all these different things. So the question's even been asked to me in the past couple of weeks, like, why? Like, why are you saying these things? And it's like, well, Miss Tammy comes to my church, and I love her, and she's my friend, and I'm going to stand with her. And that's really important to me because that's being the church together, standing with each other, loving our neighbor, loving each other that way. But I think church missed the mark, not only in just leadership, but speaking at all on anything. Like most white churches are not going to talk about racism because you're talking to white people, like, and they don't want to hear it. I mean, just for the most part, if we're really being honest, they don't want to hear it. I think we've seen that. There's a good 2-week period of people wanting to hear it, and they're saying, okay, I'm done with it. I'm tired of hearing it. Let's move on. Stop getting mad. Stop getting angry. Stop with all that. Like, just let's go back to what where it was before. But I'm excited that it hasn't, because now we can keep talking. We can keep working through this together, no matter how uncomfortable we get. Like, because there's been times like I've been uncomfortable, but I'm thankful that I've had the opportunity to do that. So Keith, growing up in Greenfield, man, we grew up across the street from one another.
That's right.
Keith had a punching bag that sat on his back porch. He would hit it, and his hand would go through it. And he scared me. I thought he would always kill me. He's a big old strong dude, man. He's always been big and strong, always. Mean football player, him and Anthony. Anthony was all-star in football too. But talk to me, man, just about growing up, where we were, and some experiences you had, and just maybe your perspective on where we are right now.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me this evening. And, I'm one of them folks, I don't mind speaking my mind, and I say what's on my mind. And to address the situation with y'all, too, what you just said. The whole time, if you look at this video, I've been sitting here comfortable with my left hand right here on my leg. Okay, say the officer's hand wasn't in his pocket, and it was comfortable just like mine. I'm about 6'1.5", close to 6'2", 285 pounds. If you're able to sit there that comfortable, hand in your pocket or out of your pocket, he wasn't getting knocked around. Like, I'm not even getting bumped around here. So if I'm realize I'm that comfortable, you're not a threat. So how can I be a threat to you if I'm that relaxed and have the time to look down at you while I'm sitting there? And I'm still not getting knocked around. You're not a threat. So to address that part, we agree to disagree. Another issue, hate is taught. You're not born with hate. It's something that starts as a young age. And to blame the generation today, you're not at fault for what's happening today, but you have to wake up and really realize it's taught. It's learned behavior. If you bring your kids up racist, they'll be racist. What child do you know is born that comes out and says racial slurs from the day he's born? Right. They don't have that ability to know how, or that knowledge. It's taught. It's something that, it comes down from generation to generation. And me as a black man, we want people to understand, especially the white race, is that we don't want to take over anything. We want the same thing that you want. We want to be able to have a house, a home, a good job, feed our family, put our kids through good schools, let them get a good education, and everything else. Do we hate police officers? No, we do not. You know what I have against police officers? Nothing. The only thing I have against them is the crooked ones and the racist ones. Call it for like it is. Yeah. Because there are good officers. But there are crooked ones and bad ones. There's black, white, Asian, Mexican. We can name every race there is. There are your good ones. There are your bad ones. They're always saying there's a black sheep in the bunch. Okay? But at the same time, all this is going on is to start a diversity, an uproar, to cause a division. What's the number one thing that's worked in America for hundreds of years and it still works today? You bring up race, man, you can get a hornet's nest stirred up. A black man got killed. Other black men been getting killed for hundreds of years. And then as soon as it happened, the black people are going to go out and speak up for our race and try to defend it because we've been watching it for hundreds of years. And then as soon as we do that, it offends the white race because it's not that they are, don't want us to have nothing. Some of them do and some don't. But the point I'm trying to make is that they don't want us to enjoy ourselves the way you are. There is such thing as white privilege, is that you're able to do things that I'm not able to do because of the color of your skin, whether it's loan, jobs, or this and that. And black people are not lazy. If it wasn't for us in slavery, the agricultural part would have never got done. We were the ones out there getting beat and doing it. Now, in order for certain white people to see where we're coming from as a black race, sometimes you got to go down memory lane and use your mind and imagination and see it from a black person's perspective and see how it was for that family and how they grew up. And where I'm getting at with that is that you take slavery, for example. If the slave master wanted to go down there and mess with his slave, which was the black woman, if he wanted to have sex with her, we're grown adults, let's get it out there. He would go do it at free will. Nobody could stop him. Even if he was married or whatnot, his wife knew better to open her mouth. She had no rights either, remember? Right. She couldn't vote, she couldn't do nothing either. He was the breadwinner. He owned the slaves, he owned her. He owned the land, he owned it all. So he go down there. Now, when slaves are sold, it may be husband, wife, family, children. They might all went together. Some of them were separated. Say they weren't separated. So that black man has got to watch his wife be raped. And he's got to deal with it. And if he says something or try, if he's going to get killed or whatnot, they either do it in front of him or take her somewhere. Now, I'm not trying to say that to stir up something. I just want you to visualize what that looks like. So if we play role reversal, how would you feel if it was done to you? And then how would you feel like in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where we was doing good for ourselves and had homes and business and law? Everybody knows the history if you dig it up. And all because of altercation between a black man and a white woman, one thing led to another. Ku Klux Klan's marching down them areas. They're shooting, they're riding, they're destroying business, stuff that they worked hard for, stuff that we had. And they're destroying it. And then they rounded up thousands of us. Left us for dead, some of them starved to death and everything. So when you look at that, it's like everything is designed to hold us back. And it will bring us back some. And then it's like we're playing catch up. And it was designed to stay that way, so we would always play catch up. And when you would take a slave that was in the field working his butt off, doing everything, he could be my age. I'm 45 years old. But he didn't know how to read or write. He wasn't allowed to. He wasn't taught to, because if he could read and write, he could read signs, he could free himself, he could run away. He could figure out how to go north, south, east, and west. So you can take a 7-year-old child sitting on the porch drinking tea or whatever they're doing. They can read and write, and you can't. It was a crime to be educated. Knowledge is power. So we were separated from that as well. And now, we was talking about the church, for example. I used to ask my mom that when I was young growing up and wonder why, like on fourth Sunday, we have a fourth Sunday fellowship where all the churches gather together. So I kind of grew up Church of Christ. You know, it's kind of strict if you never have been there. And we actually went to a white church where the majority was white. And they was a Church of Christ as well. Now, for the racist individuals that couldn't accept the fact that Jesus Christ was a Jew, they made him look like blonde hair, blue eyes. So as you're a young black kid growing up in this world, and your history's pushed aside. I'm learning about your history and what y'all did, but whatever we didn't accomplish, you either take it from us or we didn't do it. Let's just be real about it. Either we didn't do it or you take it. Same way with the land, you took it. I mean, you didn't. The forefathers, let's just keep it real. You're not responsible for what they did. The only way you're responsible for what's going on today, if your ancestors taught your grandparents and so forth to be hatred, to continue to be this way, and then you're teaching your kids that, then you're teaching your kids to do the same thing. When people say history repeats itself, you're teaching them to do the same thing that's been going on for hundreds of years. So they're doing the same thing. And then, and it just keeps on. It's a never-ending cycle. You take another, do your research on them. William Tappan Thompson. He was an editor, he was a writer, he was a Democrat. Everybody wants to put everything on the Republicans, but he was Democrat. Democrats had slaves too. They played a role in this. Their hands ain't clean. Now, the black race, we just want unity. One of the biggest fears in America is that they're worried about if we unite. They don't want us united because they know it's powerful. They was worried about it then. Edgar Hoover even said it himself. One of the biggest fears in America is black man united. Because they know we're powerful when we unite. When we're killing each other, black on black crime, and they see that, not all white people, I'm speaking about anybody of different race, when they see that, they're happy about that. Because that's something they don't have to do. We're doing it for them. And then when we let somebody from the opposite race do it, they're happy about it as well, because that's one more down or two more down. Yes. If I can keep you that much farther down, then you're going to be that much farther behind. So you can constantly play catch up. And then when you use statistics and say, okay, you're killing each other more than we are in this and that. If you're 60+% of the United States population, and we're only 13+, and you're saying you're losing your country and you're losing, if you're losing, who's winning? It makes you wonder, if you're losing, who's winning? Our numbers are not going to be the same as far as percentage-wise on death and murder and everything else because you're at 60 plus, I'm at 13 plus. And then all of us been on Facebook and you see everything everybody's posting. It's more hate. They want us to hate all officers. They want us to hate each other. The best thing they want us to do, that's that 1%. Now, I'm not picking at nobody in this room, but that 1% is not in this room. I don't have to know your pocketbook or whatnot, but you're not that 1%. You're not that 1%. So that 1% is pulling the strings. While they're pulling the strings, they would love to see me and you in the streets fighting than banding together. Because if we band together, we're powerful. There's power in numbers. Now we're going against the opposition. Now they're actually sitting there pulling the strings, and while they're pulling the strings, you and I in the streets, maybe peacefully protesting. Say this guy here shows up, his whole purpose is to disrupt and cause chaos. That's what he gets paid to do. So he's there messing up, hijacking mine and your purpose. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. And I say this brother right here shows up and he wants to loot. So he's looting and say he's looting with them. We're protesting, them two looting, he's riding. The whole cause is thrown out the window and everybody's looking at it like it's not a peaceful protest. The media flip it because now we're arguing about who's breaking this, burning up this, doing this. And to make a long story short, we're doing nothing no more different than anybody else has done. We're not the first one to burn down a building. We ain't the first one to burn down somebody's company. We're not the first to doing none of that. It's just like we were all on lockdown not long ago. Everybody was. Every race and everybody was. When 9/11 happened, when that happened, we was united. And that had the country pulled together. And for black people, we kind of like, you off our backs for a minute. We got a different image. It ain't us now. You see what I'm saying? That's how we looked at it. We in this together, so now we fighting together. While we're sitting here on American soil fighting against each other, our black brothers and sisters, women, and all of them are over there battling and dodging bullets for all of us so we can sit over here and argue and bicker. But they over there doing the fight, and they're pulling together while we're over here fighting. So see, that's what they want. They want a race war. They want disruption. And when I say they, I mean this 1% that controls everything. Because see, they're on their private yachts, their private little hidden bunkers. They're safe. They're out of sight, everything. And they let us go do what we got to do. Hope we kill off each other. Because, that helps their agenda to get across. New world or one world domination. There's always someone pulling strings. And the ones that pull the strings are not out there on the street. You won't see them. If anybody thought about them, they're not the ones out there fighting all day long. They might be talking behind closed door or one of them cameras and whatnot, but they're not on the front lines because they don't want to be seen like that. And I don't want to take up the whole time, but I'm going to address something real quick about this Confederate flag. We don't have a problem with it. It's a battle flag. I understand what it stands for. It's a battle flag. Be proud of your flag or whatever you want to be. But do people realize that same Confederate flag, the person that carried that Confederate flag through battle, killed the man that was carrying the American flag through battle? And when people say they don't want history to repeat itself, actually, it was white man on white man. It was majority, y'all were fighting each other. It was a civil war. And then people say they want history to repeat itself. Okay, well, what do you mean by that? And they say if you keep doing this, stuff posted on Facebook, you keep doing this, history going to repeat itself. What's going to happen to you before is going to happen again. So what are you saying? You want slavery to happen again? Or you want to lose a war again because you didn't win it? They didn't win it. Okay, so what, you want that to happen again? It would not be the same battle. Right. That battle fought then, and today's technology is a whole different era.
You lose a lot faster.
Exactly. So the same capabilities you had then, today is multiplied tenfold. And then we as a people, if we don't wake up and realize that what we're doing out here, God, we separated God from everything first and foremost, that we want to separate him out of all of it. We kept us from church, kept us from everywhere, but you can go to Walmart, you can go to Lowe's, you can go anywhere you want. They didn't even want us to go to church. And they stopped that. And to me, I feel like all of it was a test run. COVID may be for real, but all of it was a test run. And at the same time, is to see how we're going to do. Because right now, it's stirring up a hornet's nest between us all. But I got off track for a second, but let me get back when I was talking about that flag. Here's something. Paint the scenario in your eye. If that battle flag is considered a battle flag, and there's nothing wrong. I grew up watching Dukes of Hazzard. It was on the car. I liked the Journal League jump. Everybody liked it. We grew up watching that. 18, Journal League, all that. I ain't no problem with it. I didn't understand everything behind it. Okay, but look at it from a black person's perspective. Say we're in our neighborhood. Ku Klux Klan's marching down our neighborhood. They got that patch on their clothes. They got carrying a flag, walking down your neighborhood, saying hateful things, destroying your business, killing you. This is what was happening in the past. And then you're black and looking at that, you're like, okay. So I'm supposed to see the stars, 13 states, stars represent the 13 Confederate States of America. The blue represents Christ. The white represents purity. The red represents the blood. Okay. It got hijacked. Your cause got hijacked the day that you come in there, blew up my house, killed my family, drug us across the street, hung us in a tree, did all that, and you say this flag represents all that. And we're like, okay, this is not what Jesus is about. This is not what he wants.
That's right.
If we read the Bible, that is not what he wants. If we're supposed to be Christ-like, we're supposed to follow in his footsteps, which will never be perfect, and we can't. But if we follow Christ-like, then we're not to do it. We're supposed to love our neighbors, we'll love ourselves. So if I love myself and care about myself, I won't bother you. I won't steal from you. I won't do things to harm you. I want the same respect that I give you, I want it in return. Now see, that got hijacked. And when that happened, it puts that picture in everybody's eyes. If we're walking down the street with a Malcolm X flag, doing it in your neighborhood, and blowing up everything, destroying stuff, and killing you and calling you, every time you see that flag, you're like, man, there comes trouble.
Yeah.
You see, but we've learned to deal with it. We've learned to cope and evolve and go along with everything as well. All we want is to be heard.